Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS and Shana Tova. I'm Emily Schrader, and today we have a special episode for the high holidays where we're taking a look, of course, at all the latest headlines from a very busy week here in the Middle East. First, we have the Palestinian state recognition by the UK, France, and others. We also have the UN General Assembly and their usual hypocrisy. We'll also discuss the reinstatement of snapback sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran that returned just this week. All that and more on Axis of Truth. Well, first things first, let's talk about Palestinian statehood. There's been much discussion about the fantastical two-state solution. So let's review what went down this week at the UN and, of course, the lead up to it. On September 21st, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and Portugal officially recognized a Palestinian state, as well as other countries. One day later, France and Malta, which followed suit at the UN General Assembly in New York. Now, these governments claim that they were reviving peace, while in reality, they are rewarding hostage-taking and, of course, making peace far less likely. Now, recognition handed out now while there are negotiations that are ongoing, while Hamas still holds hostages from the October 7th massacre, is literally incentivizing these crimes against humanity that has been and will be emulated time and time again by terrorist groups like Hamas and the Islamic Republic, and yes, against Western civilians too. Before Macron and France's declaration, we saw, for example, that negotiators said progress was possible in the negotiations for the release of hostages. Afterwards, talk stalled. Because if you hand out statehood with hostages still underground, you've literally told Hamas to keep them, drag things out, and you'll get rewarded anyway. And no one will force you to step down from power, which is what we're dealing with now. Now, let's not forget that many of these same governments insisted recognition would only be on the table if Hamas was excluded from governance. Some even mentioned that hostages must be returned as a condition. And yet, Hamas still has governance in Gaza, still brags about kidnappings, still launches rockets, and still has influence in the so-called unity Palestinian government. Despite this, the UK, Australia, Canada, France, and Malta went ahead anyway. Empty promises, zero principles, and why? Complete cowardice. Take, for example, the case of Italy. Italy refrained from recognition only to see massive violent riots nationwide the next days from Arab migrants. They destroyed the Milan train station. They destroyed public spaces in Rome and multiple other Italian cities. And then suddenly, after we see the Italian Prime Minister, Meloni, taking a harsher stance on Israel in the UN, even discussing sanctions. Now, she's traditionally been an ally of Israel, so what's changing here? Because these statehood recognitions aren't about Palestinians. They're about an Arab mob and a radicalized Muslim population that threatens the entire security of many European states, Italy included. So is it any wonder that the UK and France, who have massive Muslim populations, are kowtowing to these bullies? It's about appeasement. It's not about justice. It's not even about Palestinians. And worse, practically speaking, there's no actual state to recognize. There is no Palestinian currency. There's no borders, no stable leadership, no infrastructure, no governing, functioning government institutions. The Palestinian Authority can't even control its own enclaves, which of course includes Gaza. That's how Hamas came to power in the first place. And yet democratic Western states are rushing to crown this chaos with legitimacy. And here's the kicker. They lecture about self-determination and the two-state solution, but both parties are not in favor of such a move right now. The Palestinians have never supported a two-state solution. They want to destroy Israel. And yet they, like true Western imperialists in Europe and even other countries as well, such as Australia and Canada, they're the ones who think they can decide from London or Ottawa or Canberra or Paris who is and is not a state. It's the height of arrogance. Europeans and their allies dictating the Middle East borders over the heads of the people who actually live here. They claim to oppose colonialism, but this is a form of colonialism 2.0. Now, Britain, especially, should know better. But instead of learning from its history, it's repeating it, and all the while empowering hostage-taking. Recognizing Palestine under these conditions does not bring peace. It kills it. It tells Hamas, take hostages, keep firing, and the world will reward you. That isn't statecraft. It's idiocy. And let us be absolutely clear about this. Britain and the other countries who recognize Palestine have chosen Hamas over the hostages. Well, now the politics of hate have infected European soccer. In our next story, we see UEFA is seriously deliberating whether to kick Israel out of the Football Association. Not because of cheating, not because of match fixing, not because of anything to do with sports. No, this is about turning a beautiful game into a weapon against the only democracy in the Middle East. Now, the campaign is as bigoted as it is transparent. If UEFA bans Israel, it is not a sporting decision. It's a political lynching. It's punishing Israeli athletes for the crime of existing. And let's be honest, UEFA is not debating the conduct of China or Qatar, only Israel. The double standard really couldn't be more obvious. Yet in the middle of this fiasco, some of Israel's friends are standing up, and some of them not even friends. Germany, the Czech Republic, Albania, Georgia, even Armenia have all called out this sham for what it really is. And they've promised to vote against the expulsion. Because once you turn sports into a political inquisition, you've completely missed the point of sports. This whole campaign is a mockery of everything that sports is supposed to be. Football is supposed to be about fair play, about competition, about sport on the field. It's supposed to unite people across borders, not turn into an international show trial against Jews. And yet this is what Israel's enemies are insisting on doing in every way possible. UEFA should be ashamed that this even made it onto the agenda. And if they want to preserve even a shred of credibility, they need to throw this campaign into the trash where it belongs. And now, finally, some good news. The United Nations has finally reimposed a full suite of sanctions on the Islamic Republic under the snapback mechanism after Europe's E3, Britain, France, and Germany triggered it, asserting that the Islamic Republic violated its nuclear commitments, which, of course, they have. This move is long overdue, something I personally and many other advocates have called for. For years, the Islamic Republic defied the 2015 nuclear deal, enriching uranium far beyond allowed levels, expanding their ballistic missile programs and sowing chaos across the region. And now consequences have finally arrived, at least some of them. These sanctions include a renewed arms embargo, restrictions on uranium enrichment, a ban on missile-related activity, asset freezes, and travel bans on officials and entities that are driving these violations. Now, these measures were supposed to snap back years ago when Tehran openly cheated, yet political cowardice, especially in Europe, has delayed them. At last, we see that the world, at least in part, is correcting its course. The regime in response is raging, claiming this is illegal, but the facts are really very simple if you look at it. The snapback was written into UN Resolution 2231 specifically to ensure that if the Islamic Republic broke its word, the sanctions would automatically return, hence snapback. And that is exactly what's happened. Israel is absolutely right to call this a major development. It proves that patience with the Islamic Republic has run out, patience that never should have been granted in the first place. The Iranian economy is already reeling, currency is collapsing, prices soaring, and public frustration is, of course, rising. We see that the pressure is working. And this isn't just about economics, it's about principle. The message to Tehran is very clear. If you violate your commitments, if you violate these deals, you should be isolated and punished. And for too long, they've gotten away with this. If you think you can blackmail the world with nuclear escalation and your funding of terrorism across borders, you will fail. The return of snapback sanctions is not only justified and long overdue, it reminds the Islamic Republic that the world hasn't forgotten its lies or its crimes. And now for the next story I have for you, it's a developing one, but it's just important to understand. So I want to discuss it a little bit in this episode. We may just have a deal to end the war in Gaza. And here is what it's looking like. The United States has rolled out a 21-point plan from what we know so far to end the war in Gaza and create a pathway even to Palestinian statehood. The reaction so far is mostly cautious optimism. I mean, if it brings our hostages home, I think Israel will do almost anything. President Trump is saying he's received a very good response from Israel and Arab leaders as well. And senior Israeli officials told Channel 12 that they view the plan as a framework for a day after in Gaza, not necessarily a forced imposition. So this proposal offers immediate ceasefire terms, the release of all living hostages within 48 hours after acceptance, disarmament of Hamas, a transitional government run by competent Palestinians and international experts, as well as plans for rebuilding Gaza without forced displacement. Now, for Israel, the plan presents an opportunity, not really a surrender. Prime Minister Netanyahu is said to be negotiating with Trump's team and exploring concessions while insisting on security guarantees. It remains to be seen what that will look like, but Israeli leaders are viewing the 21 points as a starting point, a template to adjust, not just a script to bind them. The plan, of course, is long overdue. We have wanted a solution to this problem for a long time, and the war has continued to rage on with hostages remaining and institutions with lack of vision when it comes to this conflict, a lack of solutions. This proposal does offer a structured bridge between military pressure and a diplomatic resolution. And I think it also sends a message to Hamas that the world wants a deal and won't tolerate your rule. Now, unfortunately, the Palestinian statehood recognition is working against this, but if implemented with scrutiny, it could become the framework that guides Israel and Palestinians toward a ceasefire and hopefully the return of our hostages. Unfortunately, I think one of the main questions that remains is about the so-called competent Palestinians who are supposedly going to lead, as well as disarmament. There wasn't really any clarity in terms of what that looks like, who's going to hold them accountable. And frankly, there is no Palestinian leadership right now. I mean, what we're seeing is a corrupt, kleptocratic, human rights violating regime in the West Bank under Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, that's still working with Hamas. So it becomes very difficult to trust anyone in Palestinian leadership when this is the governance that you see going on. It's very concerning, and I think we need to look deeper into this plan and demand that there are actual answers for this before we jump on board and get excited about, oh, well, it's the solution, it's the end to the war. This is something that needs to be closely examined and held accountable when it comes to disarming Hamas and removing Hamas from power, because we tried this in Lebanon. What's going on right now is extremely concerning in Lebanon. The Lebanese government is having a horrible time getting the Hezbollah terror group, of course, with the backing of the Islamic Republic of Iran, to disarm, which is something that the entire international community has called for. It's something that multiple UN resolutions have demanded, and yet they still seem unable to do it. We don't want a repeat of this. So whatever resolution comes from this 21-point plan, first and foremost, I'm hopeful that it can see the return of our hostages, but we do have to be accountable when it comes to removing Hamas from power. I'll continue to update you on this peace plan. Hopefully we can find a solution, but for now, there's cautious optimism in the air. Now, I want to go on to the good, the bad, and the ugly of this week. First off, our good story of the week, Ukraine has now received a U.S.-made Patriot air defense system from Israel, and it is already operational. This transfer marks a significant boost to Ukraine's ability to defend its airspace against missiles and drone swarms that have been so frequent throughout this war. It's also a concrete act of solidarity from Israel. For Ukraine, it offers critical protection for civilians, for infrastructure. But for Israel, this is actually demonstrating more of a willingness to extend defense support beyond its own border, something they've been very hesitant to do so far in this war. In a war where air defense is really paramount, this gift could mean the difference between saving lives in Ukraine and losing them. And now the bad and the ugly. I got to combine these because it's just so nasty. taking to the UK. An NHS doctor in the UK known for her virulent Jew hatred, Dr. Rahme Aladwan, complained the UK is occupied by Jewish supremacy, called Israeli Jews genocidal terrorists, denied the atrocities of the October 7th massacres, including sexual assault, and she also called the Holocaust a fabricated narrative. And yet, she is still being permitted to practice medicine in the UK. Now, you tell me, would you want this monster as your doctor? The UK Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service this week refused to suspend her, insisting that the public, in their words, would not be alarmed or concerned by these comments. This is not just incompetence, it's actually dangerous. A doctor with access to patients is spewing openly anti-Semitic, discriminatory, pro-Hamas propaganda, and the NHS, instead of acting, is looking the other way. This was even condemned by the health secretary. If this is the standard, Jewish patients cannot trust the system that's supposed to protect them at the most basic level. Truly a national disgrace. Well, that's a wrap for this week on Axis of Truth. We'll be back soon with more exclusive interviews, more stories from the Middle East and beyond. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. And thank you for watching. See you next week on Axis of Truth, only on JNS.